Hey, welcome back to my channel, African Diaspora Retirement. Today, we are going to be looking at the important topic of what do I do when I've retired? When my work that I used to do 35 hours a week, 12-hour shifts or even longer per day, when that work has gone and I'm no longer doing that work, when I no longer have the structure of being in an environment where I know what I'm waking up for, I know what I'm going to do that day, I know who generally I'm engaging with, I know my tasks, my roles, I know my purpose. When we retire, that is when work is no longer our primary source of income, when we are relying mainly on our pensions and other side incomes. When we retire, all those generally come to an end. And all of a sudden, particularly after the first year, probably not even first year, probably the first 6 months, 3 months of, oh, I'm going to be traveling, I'm going to be meeting friends and family. When those stop, we start thinking, wow, how am I going to spend all this time? And even people like myself who decided to retire back to Africa, spend a large segment of the time in an African country, in an African city. My precise one is Lagos, Nigeria. Spend a decent part of the year there, 6, 7, 8 months of the year, and then go back to Europe. Even those of us that do that, we still have to think about what will I be doing with my time? I read an article and it said, the dark side of retirement. They said that a lot of people are not speaking about the social and emotional aspects of retirement. We focus on the monetary aspects and for many fair, yes, but for people like us that decided to live in much cheaper countries, the monetary aspect isn't as important as say if we're living in Europe on on a pension. It's going to be harder than say living in Lagos, Nigeria. And rightfully so, a lot of focus is on health, how to stay healthy in your latter years. But many people do not focus on the social and emotional aspects of retirement. You know, things that make you re- be have a good emotional well-being when you're retired. And I read an article some time ago. I'm trying to become a social and emotional welfare, social and emotional coach for people who are retired. And this article said it was entitled "The Dark Side of Retirement," that there are three killers for people who are retired. One, alcoholism and drug usage. Many people, I can understand myself, particularly living, spending a lot of time in Nigeria where beer is very cheap. You're retired, you have nothing to do, you wake up in the morning, boom, let me open a bottle of beer. And that's probably how the day goes by, and you probably finish 6, 7 bottles of beer or a whole bottle of wine. And as I said, in an African country, this is even more dangerous because it's even cheaper. So obviously, more and more people, as they retire, they're battling alcoholism because for a lot of them, that's the only thing they have keeping them going. The other issue this article said that a lot of people who are retired are facing is depression. One minute you are defined by your post. Many people get their status from their jobs. I'm a doctor, engineer, civil servant, whatever. They get their status by their job. All of a sudden, this status goes. You do not know how to define yourself. Oh, Yomi, what are you doing? I'm a retired person. That's got it sounds suspect. You don't know how to define yourself, and a lot of people get depressed by that. And actually, that is why a lot of people continue working when they shouldn't really, because at the end of the day, yeah, work part time, and I'm also doing some little jobs, but they continue working long hours because they're afraid to let go of their job, because without that job, they feel they have no identity. And obviously, when they do leave, that feeling of having no identity can become very um, dangerous. It can make people depressed and, feeling sad, feeling that you have nothing to offer. And then obviously the third thing that this leads on to the third dark side of retirement, according to this article, was, and I agree, this article was, it was based on American retirees. That the third issue is that there's an increase in suicide. There's an increase in retired people taking their lives because they're depressed and feel that they have nothing to offer, and nobody regards them as being important. So it is obvious we need to spend time thinking about what do we want to do, how we occupy our time. And yes, it's good to travel, particularly if you have the means or interest, but there are also other things you can do, particularly if you are thinking about moving to an African country. But also, even if you're staying in the West, one, you can think of, is there a skill I have that I can actually, you know, do a small side hustle? Do I have a skill that people will pay me something to do? Do I want to learn a new skill? Um, Another article I read said that the most successful businesses, those that last this for a longer time, may not be making billions of naira, but billions of pounds, sorry. But the most successful businesses are those that are actually started by people in their 50s and above, because those people come into business with a lot of life skills. So, is there a small business, social enterprise that you think you can do? And if you're retiring to Africa, I can assure you there are lots of opportunity to do that. However, note of warning, start slowly. Don't invest all your money. Start slowly. You do not need to impress anybody. And at this stage of our lives, we don't need to hammer to be, multi-millionaires. So, is there, that may be an option to help you decide what you're going to spend your time. And also, it could be you had an old hobby that you liked, before you started working, got into the grid mill of working. You may have an old hobby that you liked and you want to relearn. I personally am trying to learn French because obviously, because I said I'm based in Lagos, Badagry, Lagos, and it's close to Benin Republic, and I actually like traveling to Benin Republic. I said, let me learn French. Still going, every going, but I'm picking up some words, and it's keeping me focused a bit. The other thing is there something I can volunteer in? What volunteer opportunities are open to me? Again, for people particularly that are, thinking of retiring to Africa, although you have to be cautious, there are lots of opportunities. Organizations, groups would love you to volunteer with them. And even for instance, if I ever did decide to stay in the UK, return back and stay there permanently, I love reading, and I would have volunteered on a project that teaches adults how to read, because it said in the UK there are a large number of adults that don't know how to read it, and I feel that's sad, and I would have loved to. There's a project I saw, I would have loved to volunteer there. So think, is there anything you can volunteer, any area you think you can volunteer? Because by volunteering, you are thinking of other people apart from yourself, and that's a good way to keep your emotional state well. And also, you'll be making lots of social contacts. Those of you that are grandparents, uh, another option could be if you want to, because your children shouldn't expect that you are going to be there, take care of their children. But if you want to, you could offer that help, looking after your grandparents, your grandchildren, for a part of time. That could be something you could do. Um, there are lots of things I think out there that we have to think about in terms of how we occupy our time when we are retired. Because if we don't, those big free killers, we either get into alcohol or drugs, we end up getting depressed, and then for some people they may decide that there's nothing to live for, and they end up taking their lives. So please, my advice to any of you that have retired and are finding it difficult, begin to explore what skills you have, what things you would like to, new things you would like to learn, how you can engage with people, what thing can you do to create social contact, how you can engage with people. And the big thing about, one fortunate thing about retirement that is that we can rebrand ourselves. We have the time now. We can rebrand ourselves. You can decide to become anything you want to become, because you have that time. You work at it, rebrand yourself, and come out new. And as I said, as I believe and as I know, one of the reasons why I also said I spend a lot of time in an African country is, in many African countries, being old is a badge of honor that you may have something to offer the younger generation. I'm not saying that just because you're old, it means you are great. Some of us, some older people are worse than some dodgy young people. But if you, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of African countries do believe that if you're old, you have a lot to offer, and they will be, those communities, those individuals will be ready to work with you. And that's, I know they say in many Western countries, loneliness is one of the major sources of uh, uh, depression among retired people. But you know, if you think of how you can use your time, if you think about how you can volunteer, if you think about contacts that you may want to remake with your family or remake with your friends, loneliness doesn't have to be an option. And also, as I said, um, take time out to find what you want to do with your retirement transition period, because reality is, for many of us, we are going to spend at least a decade, some two, some 3 decades in this retirement transition. So it is important that we do begin to spend some time focusing on our purpose, how to keep ourselves busy, how to keep ourselves occupied. Finally, for me, I'm lucky in that when I do get a bit bored of being in an African country, I can always return back to Europe, UK, London, Manchester, because obviously being of dual citizenship, being born in the UK, I have that right. Some people may not have it. But if you do, I would say don't burn the bridges, because you never know when going back to a Western country where you worked in, where you had friends, may be helpful to you. Anyway, I hope I've said something useful in this post. If you feel it's useful, please subscribe and like, but more importantly, please comment on topics you would like me to give my honest opinion about, particularly around the areas of retirement in general and those that want to retire back to Africa. So I would really appreciate that. And also, feel free to comment generally about this channel. Anyway, that's all for today. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye.